this Criminal Law Subcommittee will come to order. We have several matters before us. And let's do the quick ones first. So, Delegate Pogge had House Bill 1879 sent back to this subcommittee, and I think that Delegate Klein has a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to lay on the table.
Okay, and the patron is aware this may happen. Okay. The motion, is there a second? All right, motion has been made and seconded to table House Bill 1879. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. Delegate Elbow. Mr. Delegate Elbow, can you come up here for just a minute? Okay. So, Delegate Elbow, we have until the Civil Committee meets at 1:30. Is that right? Okay. So everyone will be joining us at 1:30. We have two things we have to do, and then a couple of things that we could do here if we get done, and we could do it here rather than for the full committee in terms of like the drone bill. Okay. So the primary reason we're here is after we concluded our last meeting, we were notified that people wished to testify on a couple of the bills and they hadn't had a chance. And so Delegate Albo said, let's schedule a second meeting on the same subject. So what we need to do, we have House Bill 2236 and House Bill 2000, both of which Klein's bill was rolled into the Poindexter bill. The Poindexter bill was reported out. I'll entertain a motion by anyone on the prevailing side of the Poindexter bill to bring it back before us for consideration.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Klein.
I vote on the prevailing side and move to reconsider House Bill 2000.
Okay. Is there a second? Second. All right. All in favor of reconsidering the vote whereby we reported House Bill 2000 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. Okay. So House Bill 2000 is now properly before the committee.
And Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Klein.
to just kind of summarize, House Bill 2236 has already been rolled in, and House Bill 2000 has been amended to strike the language regarding the checking against the database. Is that right?
Okay. So we have the bill is in the posture as preferred by the patron. Delegate Poindexter. So, Delegate Poindexter, some of the people here were not here when you spoke last. Let's go ahead and present the bill as amended, and then we will give the public a chance to be heard on this measure. So, Delegate Poindexter, you're first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. I'll be brief. I certainly agree with the rolling of the bin and the bill being in the current posture. I think we all agree that our immigration system has issues. And I hope we can all agree that we're also a state and a nation that operates under the rule of the law. If one doesn't like a law, one disagrees with one, we still obey it, and we work within our legislative process, our courts, and our elections process to change it. This bill, I brought it to ensure and encourage Virginia jurisdictions to simply follow the rule of law. Certainly the vast majority of immigrants are great people, follow the law and everything else. But the old truth is one or two bad apples in every bushel you buy or raise, and I've raised some apples. There'll be a bad one or two, and this applies to every group, including immigrants. We have around the country today a number of states, cities, such as California, Chicago, Texas, D.C. area, Kentucky, etc., where some bad apples have created some very bad circumstances and done some evil things. In Virginia, we've had instances where some bad apples have killed people. Virginia Beach, Prince William, one in Franklin County a few years ago. We have gang influence and that type of thing. So these are the bad apples. Jurisdictions in some areas of Virginia, or around the world, not the world, the USA, or what we call providing sanctuaries for the bad apples. This bill is seeking to discourage and potentially penalize any Virginia jurisdiction from providing cover for the bad apples. And yes, some local officials have and are at least in the news talking and thinking about it. And I'll mention Charlottesville from the news conference last week. So that's the bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman.
Right, so just so everybody is on the same page, and we have some members of the public that are not one of our regular visitors. So there are two bills before us. 2336 is not going forward. The only bill going forward is House Bill 2000, And there was an amendment made, so the language reads, quote, "No locality shall adopt any ordinance, procedure, or policy that restricts the enforcement of federal immigration laws to less than the full extent permitted by federal law." Delegate Poindexter, do I have it right? Okay. But that was struck. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, HB 2000 is you're correct. That is current.
Right, yes. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. All right, anybody from the panel have any questions for the patron? Okay. Council, have any observations you wish to make at this time?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, we will now take public comment. If you'd like to comment on the bill, if you would go ahead and line up. When you step to the podium, what I'd ask you to do is please identify yourself and then tell us your thoughts on the bill, and we'll just, if we can start over here. No, you're fine, you're fine. So, ma'am, if you'll step up, identify yourself and tell us your thoughts on the bill. We might have some questions. Go
Okay.
ahead.
My name is Myra Parada. I'm a PhD student at George Mason University and also a researcher on education. And I'm here with the Virginia Latina Advocacy Network. And I am opposed to this bill. Anti-sanctuary sentiment has been proven to be dangerous to our children and our community. There's a lot of research that shows that these types of sentiments are actually very detrimental to our children's well-being. I also come from an immigrant family, and a lot of my family members have been undocumented at some point. And if we were concerned about these sentiments, rather than focusing on education and well-being and upper mobility, I wouldn't have been able to achieve the education that I have, so I would not be a PhD student. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's just,
It's
amazing.
Please step up and identify yourself and tell us your thoughts on the bill.
Good afternoon. I'm Kim Bobo. I'm the director of the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. We oppose this bill. The religious community around the country is creating sanctuaries and congregations because we feel so strongly that people and families should be able to stay here safely, and that it's not wise for our communities not to protect people who are here right now. And so we oppose this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Bobo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon. Tell us your, identify yourself, tell us your thoughts on the bill.
I'm Ibby Hum. I'm here with the Latina Advocacy Network, and I'm opposed to HB 2000. I was born and raised in Arlington. I'm the daughter of a political refugee. My father came from China. He's a pro-democracy activist who was threatened by the authoritarian government there in the 80s. Now I go to the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, which, as Delegate Poindexter mentioned, Charlottesville has a really successful immigrant community. They've been very successfully resettled. I have friends there who are from the Congo, from Afghanistan, and we should be welcoming them, not hunting them down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dulce Martinez. I'm a fourth-year student at George Mason University, and I'm here with the Virginia Latina Advocacy Network. I grew up in the Virginia public school system, and going to school was always my favorite part of the day. These anti-sanctuary policies would make our students feel unsafe and lessen their enthusiasm for education. I'm in opposition of this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ruben Chavez. I'm here, I'm a citizen and also a resident of Prince William County, and I'm also here representing the Virginia Latina Advocacy Organization. And I just want to say that I am opposed to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nicole Montesinos. I'm here with the Virginia Latina Advocacy Network. Today I'm here to oppose Bill HB 2000. I am currently a freshman at Northern Virginia Community College. Our community college and four-year universities are some of the best in the country. This sort of legislation would instill fear and take away from the prestige that we take pride on. Anti-sanctuary policies have no place in Virginia, and instead we should focus on increasing trust with our immigrant community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Identify yourself. Tell us your thoughts on the bill.
My name is Ben Ragsdale. I'm from Richmond. I oppose these bills, but I'll be frank with you. First time I came to the General Assembly was in 1958. I was with my father. I was 14 years old. It was full of segregationists, and you know the bad things they were doing. They were taking away voting rights, they were closing schools, and I didn't have any problem with it at the time. But I changed. I changed as I listened to my teachers in school, as I listened to my Sunday school teachers, and as I went through life. And I think most people change. Most of you have probably, and your friends and your family. Civil rights bills since then, immigration bills under Johnson and Ronald Reagan have made us a more open and accepting society. Today I fear we are changing course, pandering to the worst biases and fears people may have. Politics and partisanship are driving us apart, and we should not go farther in this direction. America is about welcoming people and opportunity. These bills turn us against each other. Please vote no.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Kevin Maurer. I am representing the Virginia Catholic Conference. The bishops of the Catholic Church, not only here in Virginia but across the United States, do oppose these bills, and the reason why is because of public safety. All of the evidence suggests that, in fact, immigrant communities tend to be safer than the overall population. These folks, if they're undocumented, they're usually quite afraid to break the law and be deported. These bills really aren't about enforcing the rule of law. Nobody's preventing ICE from doing their job. It's about implicating local law enforcement in a job that should be a federal issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Claire Guthrie-Gustamiaga, on behalf of the ACLU of Virginia, I wanted to look at the actual language first and draw your attention to the fact that the word sanctuary is not a word that has any meaningful definition at law. Some people at one end of the political spectrum use it to describe any locality where they've even adopted a welcoming resolution, and they call that a sanctuary city. At the other end of the political spectrum, I was at an event on Monday night where it was clear that sanctuary was defined well beyond immigration, involved an intersectional approach that talked about how people are policed and a much broader range of actions before that label could be applied. So it's not clear to me in the title of the bill what sanctuary means. Secondarily, it says, no locality shall adopt any ordinance, procedure, or policy that restricts enforcement to less than the full extent permitted by federal law, not required, but permitted. So you have, in this circumstance, federal law does permit localities to choose to enter into 287G agreements with the federal government to take on the federal government's responsibility voluntarily to enforce federal immigration laws and become deputized and supervised by the federal government at the locality's expense. Some localities in the past have had 287Gs. There's only one currently existing in Virginia, which is the Prince William Regional Jail Authority Agreement. But this would say that if you were to say, as a city council person, we want to pass a resolution saying we do not want our police to enter into a 287G agreement, that you would be in violation of this statute because you did not agree voluntarily to take on something that you were, quote, permitted to do. And finally, it does something that is very important to me as a Richmonder. Our police department, as a number of other police departments, including Prince William, Virginia Beach, and a number across the Commonwealth, have policies that say that they will not automatically ask a cooperating victim or witness of crime their immigration status unless that is directly relevant to the crime being investigated. It doesn't say they will never ask, it says they won't automatically ask. And that encourages people in the community to come forward, cooperate with police, and enhances our ability to be a community in which we have everyone committed to safety and security. And this would clearly say, potentially, that was not legal in Virginia, and that would be a sad outcome of this. And so, you know, the other thing people don't recognize, Virginia is nearly unique in the combination of laws we already have on the books. I mean, we're one of, I think, 3 states that has a law that says anybody admitted to custody in any of our jails or correctional facilities automatically has everybody, it would include all of you if you were arrested and taken into custody, has their immigration status checked. So ICE is on notice the minute somebody walks in our jail, who they are and knows what their status is. We also have a presumption against bail for anybody who's determined in that process to be here without authority. We also have a bill that Delegate Bell carried, a law that says our folks can agree to release somebody up to 5 days early before they've completed their state or local sentence to ICE if that would facilitate a transfer. There are very few other states that have built into their state laws those kinds of mandates for cooperation and for interaction and for information. And you know, one of the things a lot of people don't know is our first law requiring notice to ICE dates back to the eugenics movement. During that period, the General Assembly adopted a law still on the books today that anybody admitted to a mental health facility in Virginia who is a person who is an alien, even legal, there has to be notice to the federal government of that fact. And obviously, during the eugenics period, it was because they wanted to get, as they would describe it, mentally feeble people out of the United States. But that law is still on the books today. So if you look at everything, I'm trying to figure out what problem we're trying to address with this, and I'm pretty clear that this broad language, the way it's crafted, is going to cause much more problems with our being safe than it is going to create any reason to think we're going to be safer. So I'd appreciate it if you would not adopt this measure.
Ms. Gustin-Young, if you could, just a question for you. So you have identified a number of issues, some substantive, some technical, with the measure. But I gather from your comments and from our previous conversations over the years that actually your objection is fundamental, which would be, we could take you aside for 10 minutes and work through some of the technical issues with the patron, but actually you oppose the whole endeavor. Is that fair?
I oppose the idea that there is a responsibility of Virginia localities to take on voluntarily what is a federal responsibility, which is the enforcement of federal immigration law, particularly the civil law, and that we do so at our own expense, and that we do so potentially at jeopardy of our being able to address the pressing questions that should occupy our time in terms of the safety of our communities. And so, yeah, I mean, if we had comprehensive immigration reform, we wouldn't be having this conversation because we'd have a better system and we wouldn't be saying somehow that the localities ought to do the federal government's job. I don't think that's what you should be ordering, and so there really isn't a way you could fix this that would satisfy me, but it also, or satisfies the ACLU, but it also, the way it's currently structured, has many, many more unintended consequences than I think you fully appreciate.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Huckland, thank you.
Just in response to
Delegate
your statement, Ms. Gustin-Young, I know you understand the language that it does not, in fact, require any locality to enforce immigration law. In fact, it clarifies that no locality shall essentially restrict or inhibit the enforcement of immigration law by the federal government.
To the full extent permitted by federal law. So if federal law permits you to enter into an agreement where you take on their responsibilities and your city council passes a resolution saying we are not going to sign a 287G, which we would be permitted to do, I think that's in violation of this language.
I think that's your interpretation.
Okay. Reasonable lawyers disagree often.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, identify yourself, tell us your thoughts on the bill.
Dana Schraub for the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police. Our concern with this legislation does extend to some of the comments already made by Claire and also by the representative from the Catholic Council. What we depend on in our community is our residents, not just our citizens, but our residents cooperating with police. We're concerned that the impact of this kind of language being passed will mean that members of our immigrant community that right now are law-abiding and cooperate with law enforcement for the reasons that have already been mentioned will fail to do so. We will actually drive them away from cooperating with law enforcement. And we're very much concerned that that will actually make it more difficult to investigate crimes that may be committed in the community. So we really feel like this does more harm than good in that respect because of the wedge it drives between law enforcement and the people in the community that they're trying to protect. So we do not feel this legislation is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Mary Wickham. I'm a citizen. Nobody's paying me to be here, so I hope you'll pay attention to what I'm saying. This bill, in my opinion, will drain local resources that are very important for our public safety. It will also make law enforcement officers' job much more difficult. I have personally worked with police officers in this area, in Richmond, Henrico, and Chesterfield, maybe Hanover also, who have tried to establish positive relationships with immigrant communities. This is a difficult job because there's a lot of mistrust and there's a lot of misunderstanding about who are local officers and who are immigration enforcement officers. So the police have a difficult time distinguishing themselves from immigration enforcement officers. It's very important that they do so because we have a lot of undocumented people and a lot of mixed status families in our communities. They will not call the police if they think that Uncle so-and-so is going to be deported because they called the police. The result of that is you have a lot more crime and you have people who are basically easy targets for criminals because they are not going to want to call the police. So this law will make our communities less safe. I would like to read to you from, I found this or referred to this, actually I made a lot of phone calls this morning to people that I knew in law enforcement. They are very concerned about this. Off the record, they were very concerned, and that's all I can say about that. But here's something from the Richmond website. This is the Richmond Police Department website under complaints. It says, if you are an undocumented resident, we will not report you to the Department of Immigration and Naturalization Services, INS, unless you have been convicted of certain criminal offenses. It is not our job as city police to detect or apprehend people who may be in the country or working illegally. We want to hear from all our community members. I encourage you to talk to your local police, to talk to your local sheriffs. It will drain their resources as well because they'll have to hold people anticipating ICE detainers, which don't always come right away. They may have somebody detained for 2 weeks before they hear from ICE whether they have a warrant or not. So I encourage you to think about your local resources and to not compromise the safety of those of us who live in communities that do have significant immigrant populations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning.
Hello, my name is Lana Heath de Martinez. I'm representing the Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations. We are opposed to this bill for several reasons, one of which is actually, as Claire alluded to, the fact that without comprehensive immigration reform, some of the legal channels for achieving lawful presence in the United States involve first entering without legal authority to do so. While you're in process, waiting for your case to be processed, you're not protected from deportation even though you've already reported yourself to the authorities and you're following the steps that are prescribed under current federal law. Now, we cannot affect federal law at the state level, so I'm not asking you to do that. But what I'm asking you to do is to consider that some of the people who would be caught up under this legislation are in fact following the necessary steps to gain lawful presence. And so what we don't need to do is to make that even harder and put more obstacles up for people who are trying to do everything the right way. Additionally, again, we have the same concerns about community policing that Ms. Wickham just shared, and we also have concerns about the drain on police departments as well. So thank you. We are opposed to this.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Erin Edelman, and I'm a Virginia resident, and I just wanted to simply, as a resident, voice my opposition to the bill.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, it's the afternoon, I've been advised. No, good afternoon. Sorry. Long day already.
My name is Jerry Tran. I'm also a Virginia resident, and I also just want to say I oppose the bill.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Any other member of the public like to be heard on this measure? Again, we're at House Bill 2000. Okay.
Brief response, Mr. Chairman.
I will, no, we'll give you a last word, but council have any issues that have been raised by any of the speakers?
No, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Delegate, here, yes, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I like to see the future. I have great respect for you, but my concern about this bill is twofold. One, law enforcement. I mean, I'm concerned that the unintended consequences that you will have is that law enforcement will not be able to properly investigate crimes, and that people will not report crimes, especially women who are often victims of assaults and will not be able to reach out for help. That's a huge concern for me. And also, just to let you know, I ran into an official, president of a university in my region. Students are actually terrified, not only what's happened nationally with our new president, but this type of pieces of legislation instills fear. And they've come to this country with their families in hopes of a brighter future. And those are the reasons that I'm opposing this measure. I just wanted to let you know. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, yes, ma'am, I understand what you're coming from, but the thrust of the bill is not directed at the students or the immigrants. This bill is about the local governments not doing certain things and following the law. That's all it's about. Mr. Chairman,
Delegate point.
there were several comments from the speakers that I addressed very briefly. The title of the bill contains the word sanctuary, but that's the title of the bill. Sanctuary is not mentioned in the bill. And I guess the other thing I didn't hear was any consideration for the innocent Virginians and people in other states that have been killed by bad apples, that have come out of the sanctuaries and have killed other innocent people in many different ways. And that has to be weighed in as well, as the Virginians have the right not to be killed, maimed, attacked, assaulted, or whatever other than that. Now, there's nothing in this bill that I can see about forcing localities taking on additional responsibilities. I'm not an attorney, you can read the language better than I can, but there's nothing in here that you do more. It just says you do what you're supposed to do already. And there was a comment about draining resources. I don't understand where that would come from at all. But that's my response, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Klein.
speaking of the resolution,
Yes,
or
sir.
the bill, and I don't think the title is going to affect the bill at all, but I was reading last week that the mayor of Charlottesville has directed staff to explore the steps to become a quote-unquote sanctuary city. And he was quoted as saying that he thinks that he is aware of the risks, but it is a risk worth taking, and that he is standing up for American values. Mr. Chairman, I would say that I think that the rule of law is one of those American values that we consider fundamental to our society, to our system of government, and to our nation. And this bill simply instructs local governments to adhere to the rule of law and do nothing to stand in the way of it. The enforcement of the rule of law. And so I think that it is a fair and reasonable bill. I hope the members will support it.
Any other member of the panel like to be heard before we take action? Delegate Watts.
Mr. Chairman, as we are sharing perspective from our own communities, I have represented and continue to represent an extremely diverse community as far as the breadth of nations involved, probably the most diverse of any. And over the years, the law enforcement issues have been a very serious concern. hearing the testimony citing the statement on the Richmond Police website is exactly the kind of law enforcement concerns that I have repeatedly dealt with. That just like we have for decades, police have used informants they may know that that informant could also be charged with an offense, but they have decided it is the greater societal good to use those informants to go after a more significant target. So simply to say that we are not going to, in this case, because arguably you do not have legal status, that we are going to stand in the way of good policing that protects the community is just simply not applying what has been traditionally good law enforcement. I will also like to address, it has always been my concern over the years on behalf of all of the citizens of my district, that we not set up any situation where where the intimidation factor can be used so that the criminal element becomes more ingrained in the community, more entrenched in the community. And that fear factor that this bill sets up of I don't dare report anything, or the intimidation used by individuals of power against those who may be relatively new to the community, sets up that kind of criminal element that eventually will in fact break out into the rest of the community. So I stand with those examples that I will not go on further with, where in fact the community as good law-abiding citizens have in fact been the first to police themselves, to cooperate with law enforcement, and to want to have safety in their community, and that is the perspective from the district that I represent.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, speaking to the bill. Elliot Mullen and Gilbert. Mullen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, in my personal experience, working as a prosecutor in the courtroom for the last 10 years, victims of domestic violence will go through instances of 5, 10, 15, 20 different instances of abuse before they finally choose to speak up about what's occurred to them. And the rates that occurs in are already substantially lower than for other crimes, in particular in immigrant communities. And when dealing with someone who has been abused and beaten or sexually molested within their domestic relationship, adding an additional barrier to them being able to break that cycle of abuse, adding an additional barrier to them being able to extricate themselves from a violent living situation by adding the layer of fear that they will be deported is really the antithesis of what my experience in law enforcement has been over the last decade. And so that is why I'm going to be voting against this bill.
Very good. Any other member of the panel like to be heard?
Mr. Chair, I move to report House Bill 2000.
Okay, motion has been made to report in second, House Bill 2000. Hearing no other motions, the vote's before us. All in favor of the motion to report House Bill 2000, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Yeah, because it will be reported, you could refer the noes. Thank you. All right, we have, excuse me. Yeah, no. All right, the next bill we'll be taking up, we have a few minutes before the full committee will arrive. Members of the public, the full committee will be hearing this and other measures at about 1:30. Delegate Alwood worked on the Ferris drone bill, and if you remember, we kind of had it in concept, and if we read the full committee, we could proceed right directly to the full committee, but I thought it might be efficient for us to take it up here and try to get the language better. We got 20 minutes. The drone bill. Do you know what you're asking drone bill? Okay. If you could pass out the draft you came up with, and then somebody vote on prevailing side, just we have it before us. Is there a second? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. So, if you might recall, this is not the peeping drone bill. This is the drone bill for when you're irritating or annoying somebody. And the changes we have seen are, the issue was to annoy or harass, and we weren't comfortable with annoy. So Delegate Alba, who should be here to present this, please upstairs, changed it to the coerce, intimidate, or harass. And then the second issue was, though, little I, where it says, where the primary purpose of the person causing such injury is not to coerce, intimidate, or harass any other person. And Mr. Cotter, I know you spoke with him. If you can explain us why that language is there, what's the purpose of that language? What are we trying to prevent?
Mr. Chairman, the language in Romanet 1 and Romanet 2, because it is conjunctive, I think what we're trying to prevent is somebody being charged with the crime now established in subsection A who is entering onto the land for a lawful business purpose or activity where there may be some incidental annoyance, harassment, coercion to the owner of the property.
Well, be concrete.
Mr. Chairman, I think this would be the Amazon delivery drone that flies over the person's house every day to deliver something, and that person, because they are annoyed, intimidated, or harassed by that drone, call the police and ask them to charge them with this misdemeanor after sending a notice to Amazon to ask them to desist. This would exempt that drone because that is related. Their intent is not to annoy anybody, and that's related to a lawful business purpose.
All right. What about annoyed? If I say I want you over my property? I mean, I understand you don't want to be the first time some very easily bothered person is too easily bothered. What if I just say, every day from the distribution center we see 4,600 of these drones flying over my house, and I'm sick of it, I can't get pressed.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the bill as written, since it's never going to be Amazon's intent to annoy you, then coercion.
See the day before Christmas, I'm pretty annoyed at Amazon. Yes, Mr. Cotter.
Mr. Chairman, the language for annoy, which was in the original bill, is out of, well, in the last substitute this committee has seen, is out of this bill. It is now with the intent to coerce, intimidate, or harass.
Okay. So, there won't be coercion. That would be, I'm making you do this for some other reason. I'm not even sure intimidation is much of a problem. But harassing, how would you, Dave, or council, if that is struck, the little I, so it's just if you knowingly and intentionally harass someone, what are we?
Mr. Chairman, my opinion, though, entire section B is just duplicative of the intent requirement that's in section A. It just restates that it gives sort of an affirmative defense, maybe. I guess.
Well, once you take out annoy, yes, Delegate Watts.
Basic question, Jim. Where's the burden of proof? Does the person who is flying the drone have to prove that it wasn't their intent, or do I, the one who's been harassed, bothered, have to prove that they intended to harass and bother me?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Watts, this is a criminal offense, so of course the proof is always going to have to be on the Commonwealth to prove that the person flying the drone had the intent to harass. They do not have to put on evidence that they did not have the intent.
But let's not overstate it. The law presumes you intend the likely and probable consequences of your action.
Puts burden of proof back on the homeowner.
Yeah, right, as you plain it in a criminal case, but I think that, I don't want to make it too strong. If you say to somebody, you are harassing me every time you send it over my house, and you say, well, I didn't intend to, and you do it again, at that point I'm not sure. Now the question of what does harassment mean, and that might be where we make this from getting too broad. We used to say annoy, And that seemed awfully expansive. Delegate Muller.
Mr. Chairman, I was out of subcommittee for some of the discussion of this originally. What is I understand the peeping one, but what is the conduct that we are trying to criminalize at this point, given the notable exceptions that we've already made in Section A?
Dave? What's the problem we're trying to fix?
Since we've accepted pretty much Amazon, we've accepted, someone who just wants to be able to fly a drone just for their own
Mr. Chairman,
recreational purposes.
I think it's parking over my house and
I
I tell you to put it out and you just won't. Is that the?
it is your neighbor flying the drone over your house and trying to harass you or do because they
Follow you around, chase your dog. It's not peeping, but it's all these things you can do with a drone that are an irritant on your property.
Is that a concern?
Mr. Chairman, I think the original example given on this bill before we put the language was the peeping, but somebody's not in the house peeping. So you're in your backyard, and because the peeping statute that we passed requires you to be looking inside the dwelling or inside the yard. And this was, the Delegate Ferris gave the example of someone sunbathing in their backyard, so they're not in their house, and someone's hovering over trying to take a picture of them as they sunbathe. That was the original purpose of this bill.
The short version is until these drones came, if you skydive over my house, I had one of those little helicopters, it's trespassing. My property goes up. This is not you, so it's not trespassing any more than a baseball you strike on my property or your dog. Well, so your dog runs, looking aside the following issue, your dog runs through something that you own goes on my property that's not you, it's not trespassing, it's not a crime. And the difference here is it can just float out, it can stand around, it can chase you around. They're trying to enforce some form of property right. The problem is we found a number of, if you will, legitimate uses where that is happening, and we all conclude that as long as Amazon is up high enough, satellites go over your house too, and we don't say that. So maybe we should wait till Labo gets back, but it
just seems like these are very large exceptions.
Dave, we need somebody who's working. I wasn't working on it. The question that is coming up a couple times, which is the conduct we're trying to stop is what? As long as we pass the peeping bill, which we have, and that's already going forward.
I'm just going to use the right, I think this is the conduct we're trying to stop here is nuisance. We're trying to stop from a drone being a nuisance to somebody. But the reason that these exceptions have made their way into the bill as it is that I think it's an elbow rule, but I may be wrong, that, just to get the one person, we can't catch everybody. And so these exceptions will accept the person who is on their property, but is flying the drone where it can conceivably see into your property. Or is the person, the Amazon drone, flying over your house. So that's where the exceptions came from. They were to try to narrow the focus of the law to the person who truly is trying to chase you and your dog around with the drone.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where did the language on line 19 come from? Regardless of whether such business purpose or activity is conducted for profit. What does that refer to?
Mr. Chair, that language, I think, is being recycled when we had this issue last year, and a version that was worked on by the chairman of the full court, Delegate Alvo, and myself, and Jack Rust at one point in time.
And what was it trying to catch?
It is trying to catch. It's trying to present things like Dominion, who have to fly the drones over the throttle lines to check to see if there are any breaks, which won't necessarily go over some people's properties to get to those areas, or even fly over those areas if the power
And
lines
so
are.
arguably, even though Dominion is doing this, and it's all part of their operation, arguably it's not conducted for profit. I mean, that's all part of their business that they do, which is certainly a profit issue. I just
Okay.
can't picture that.
We may have to wait until Elbow gets back. I hope that we can kind of use this time productively. Well, remember, this is one of those ones we passed largely in concept and sent people off to look at. we're talking about, this is not the peeping. We have peeping covered separately. This would be just someone's flying a drone over your property, and you want them to stop. And right now you can't. Nor can you shoot it. I mean, that's the truth is that that's property of someone else.
Sitting over the corner.
But everybody, at a minimum, we need to do something with this so it's back before full. Because, all right, so let me ask staff. So you represent the drone interest, if you will. Is that fair? Okay. So we don't have the patron. This is now we're now talking about it. I thought it'd be simple, and it's not. I mean, given that, let's assume that we pass this as is. What does this issue, but the primary purpose of the person causing such injury is not to coerce, intimidate, or harass any other person? I'm not sure what that gets you, since the prosecutor will already have to prove that you knowingly and intentionally caused it to do that. I mean, to harass someone. About to strike B, but it's somebody else's bill and he's not here, and under one of our many sort of just rules, we try not to. You can pass it without them here, but you sure hate to mess it up when they're not here. Okay, let's do this. I think, just to get this properly before the full committee, let's just pass it as is. Yeah. Okay. All right. Seriously, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. This is back for full committee. We're going to want to do a little bit of work on this. Okay, so the criminal subcommittee is done. We have no more work. Okay, so we'll just, if you give us 5 minutes, and we'll take a full committee. Yeah.
before